Our final speaker perhaps needs no introduction. Jonathan Simnett has been involved in enterprise technology business for over 3 decades, managing and turning around existing businesses and helping management and their investors in fast growth technology segments to grow, manage change, enter markets, transfer technologies, acquire, merge and sell. He will now present finally on tech M&A and AI, hype, hope, winners and losers.
Okay, so hopefully I'm going to do a little presentation here that does exactly what it says on the tin. This is how it's going to pan out. I'm going to tell you a little bit about me, a little bit about Hampleton Partners. We'll talk about the tech M&A environment in general. It does have certain characteristics, and these tend to pervade. Going to look at some tech trends at the moment and just how dominant AI in its broadest sense is in those tech trends. Already we're seeing winners and losers in terms of value creation in the tech M&A world. And the bit that you're probably all most interested in is who's buying who and for what. And this is slightly different at the moment to most tech M&A environments, and I'll tell you why. Then in the great tradition of telling you what I'm going to tell you, telling you what I've just told you, I will summarise myself at the end. So that's my slightly embarrassed looking twin brother in his Sunday school photograph being strangled by his tie. As my intro said, I've spent all my life in the tech business, so ties are very, very strange pieces of silk that people do odd things with around their neck. No idea really what they are at all. My firm, Hampleton Partners, does a very simple thing, really. We sell small technology businesses to big technology businesses. And we like to kid ourselves that's really, really important because of the specific conditions of the technology business. Hopefully I'll be able to convince you that it is important. So between me and my colleagues, we have sold over 100 different businesses, and that's sort of over 100 years worth of blood, sweat and tears, because most transactions take a year or a little bit longer. We have sold businesses, as you can see, these are recent tombstones, everything from e-commerce to, in that case, gaming metrology. If you want to see a tiny, tiny little vertical in the tech sector that generates vast amounts of money, that is it. So we do tech, only tech. We don't do anything else, we just do tech. And we think about our tech in about 8 different instances. AI falls into a lot of these. It's a difficult sector to pull apart and just go, that's IT, that's AI, because AI is creeping into everything. The other thing we do, which may interest you, is because we have a large research team, we're constantly researching the marketplace, which helps inform our valuations. These reports are published every 6 months, so there's one appearing, there are groups appearing every 3 months, if you work out the maths on that. Just go to our website and download them for free. And a lot of what I'm going to be telling you today comes from this research. So, what can I tell you about the tech environment? You can take away and at cocktail parties on a Friday, dole these facts out as little bits of interest. Well, the first thing is this, the good old NASDAQ. Well, the historical home of tech has been America, and particularly the West Coast, but the New York-based exchange on which so many of the firms eventually found themselves, the level of that essentially informs the level of M&A activity, both in terms of the amount of transactions and the value of the transactions. If you see it expressed in a different way, you can see how it moves against the upward trend of the NASDAQ and goes up and down depending on what's happening in the NASDAQ. So, unsurprising, the big financial crisis there, it dived down, and you can see it. I was just recovering from the dot-com boom and subsequent crash. It looks like we're going to have a pretty good year in terms of M&A, in terms of both volume and value this year. But the market is changing a little bit in that so much of the action at the moment, as I'll show you in AI, is the big firms readying themselves for the next upturn, not just in IT, but in global economic activity, which I think people are increasingly coming to the conclusion will be driven by AI. AI will be like the steam engine. It'll be the paradigmatic shift, steam engine, electric power. There's one little thing that's interesting at the moment, you've probably heard about it, the menopausal economy. Anybody heard that phrase? Yeah, come on, you're all in the city, you must have heard that. There's a phrase from the Deputy Governor of the Bank of England. And the idea that there may be a little period of time between conventional computing and AI, which causes a slowdown in the economy, in the same way as the switch over from steam to electric power caused a slowdown in Western economies around 1880 to 1900. So nobody could figure out why this had happened, because all the indicators looked great, but it seemed to be that paradigmatic shift that was causing the problem. One thing which is very interesting about the tech business is if you're the owner of a tech company, or if you're backing a tech company, there are profound drivers for you to sell out early. 6 to 8 years. Look at that massive decline in value. So you have to do that simple but complex calculation, which is, do I sell out early, for 30x on a small profit, or do I sell out later for 3x on a much higher level of profitability? Well, the reality is, such is the rate of change in technology, by the time you get here, there's probably no buys anyway, which of course is why you're not going to get a massive multiple. One of the things, I have a phrase which I use boringly all the time, M&A is the new R&D. It is. And the reason is because companies cannot innovate fast enough from internal resources to ensure they'll be around in the next few years. So they have to essentially outsource, explicitly or implicitly, their R&D, and it's called M&A. So, the rates of required growth from the market, from investors, the rate of change, competitive pressure, all means that all companies need to start having M&A strategies right from the very beginning. Weirdly, the biggest spenders on M&A are also the biggest spenders on R&D. So you can see this super league of companies which you all recognise who are spending vast amounts of money. And these guys, of course, are spending vast amounts of money trying not to avoid any huge fines anymore. We are seeing values and activity peak when disruption accelerates. And I would argue that we are in a period of disruption. And hearing Eleanor's session before, it worries me greatly that having been utterly battered post-war, the North not really got back on its feet, assuming that miners could go and work in call centres and other such rubbish, is about to be battered again. And it just makes me wonder whether there's a future there or not. So if you're a survivor, markets consolidate very, very quickly in IT. So you've got to be a gorilla. You've got to be the dominant force. You've got to be Cisco in routing. You've got to be in IBM in supercomputing in the old days. Occupy a niche, which of course Apple did when it was in survival mode with graphic design. Or beware, or be very, very scared indeed, because you're going to get killed unless you move very, very quickly. And we're talking about AI at the moment, but AI, I would say, is in its third coming. I'm now very old, and I've seen the first coming of commercial AI in the 80s, regeneration of interest in AI in the 90s and around the turn of the century, and the massive interest in AI right now. The reason we're all getting excited about AI, because it's sort of been referred to before in earlier presentations, is that we now have the conditions where AI can actually make a difference. And that is, we have massive amounts of very cheap computing, we have huge amounts of data being delivered by the sensors, and now we can develop the algorithms that can make sense of all that data and have the number crunching power to do it. There's still a lot of activity around M&A because the interest rates are still low and share prices are still high. The tech companies have unbelievable amounts of cash. Unbelievable. I mean, everybody knows that Apple's got more cash than the US Treasury. I mean, they're richer than Croesus. Their issue is, what do they spend it on? You know, and even you saw Bloomsbury AI announced it's been acquired by Facebook yesterday. That transaction is mostly in Facebook shares. They've hardly put any cash into it at all. And it's just a way of doing an acqui-hire and getting a piece of core technology. And to be seen to be done it, because guess what? It's about fake news. So when Zuckerberg gets in front of another political committee and go, oh yeah, we're really doing something about fake news, we're using technology, look at this company we just bought. And financial investors are starting to get interested in AI. You know, those of you who are financial investors may be thinking, hang on a minute, we've been looking at tech for a long time. Actually, PE in particular hasn't. And it's only recently that they have started to become competitive with strategic buyers. And it's only in the last few months, I would really argue. I mean, I sold a company, closed the transaction in January. The top PE offer for that company was exactly half what the winning strategic buyer paid for it. It tells its own story. And the other thing which is driving interest in M&A at the moment is it's not just a tech-to-tech market anymore. It's companies from outside tech buying into tech. 18 months ago, Carrefour, which is the world's biggest supermarket group, bought Rue de Commerce, which is essentially an e-commerce platform. So at a stroke, a big supermarket company becomes a technology company. And that has all sorts of implications internally.
IKEA, TaskRabbit, another example.
Yeah, that's a relatively new one. And this is happening all the time, which again, is driving, and somebody brought up the issue, there's 1.5 million open jobs in AI worldwide, and of course that's new money essentially. So they acquire TaskRabbit, and you've got the whole of IKEA's resources to drive that company forward, as well as a huge demonstration platform for it. So these are sort of very hopeful trends, but they do come with a lot of problems. So the trend, and it's really quite clear at the moment in investment terms, is that every company is trying to get those magic words AI into what they do. And I think we're just about getting to the stage where people understand that nothing which is going on at the moment is actually AI, because it doesn't pass the Turing test. Most of it is machine learning based. But you can see the application here. This is from last year's, the latest, in fact, Gartner trends report, and you can just see, here's their 3 trends they think are going to drive the business. Well, AI everywhere. I would argue that immersive experiences will also be including AI, and digital platforms. Yes, of course, there's going to be AI that's enabled by 5G. So AI is going through all of this stuff. Here's the hype cycle. And you can see, as you're familiar with this hype cycle, this is peak hype, and of course as we get overexcited about something, we go down to this trough of disappointment, this slough of despond. And you can see that VR is now climbing up. We're now actually getting more comfortable with VR. I mean, if we could just do something about having to strap on ludicrous headsets to do AI, then that would be better. But beware, all this stuff is coming up. Is human augmentation, Tom Cruise in the battle dress, what we saw earlier. Well, that's not even at the top of the hype cycle, so you're going to hear a lot about that. What the human augmentation will actually end up being will probably not be what we envisage it to be today, just as AI is not about robots. Fireball XL5, Zuni the robot, with Troy Tempest. No, Troy Tempest was Stingray, wasn't it? Come on, I know some of you were watching that when you were kids. You're old enough. Just be very careful in investment terms. Understand where that investment is in the hype cycle. It might be more about hope. Something else which is very peculiar about the technology business is that every early stage scale up that I encounter seems to think that it's going to get bought by Google or Apple or Intel or one of the big West Coast behemoths. They generally don't. Most European tech companies are bought by European technology companies. However, given that AI is in a slightly early stage, it is actually true that the big American companies are gobbling up AI talent, but they're doing that worldwide. I guarantee this will change. If we're in the same room in 3 years' time, I guarantee that will have moved, and Philips will have become a huge acquirer of AI in the same way as it's gobbling up medtech companies at the moment. This is what I talked about PE coming back up again, starting to move in. That's actually a higher multiple than the average multiple across the whole of tech. So I think this is going to be very, very interesting, but it's going to involve people from the financial community making decisions about investment in technology. Now, I know that's what you do, but as we saw earlier on with this presentation from Razor, by God, some of this sector is massively complicated, and it's very difficult to put consistent financial bets in them that work unless you're actually immersed in that technology on a day-to-day basis. So who are the winners and losers in this? Well, here's the good news, is that the AI marketplace is still rocketing ahead. And when Sundar Pichai talks about Google as an AI-first company, when they were previously a search-first company, something's happening. Lots of investment going in there, but the AI is being hidden elsewhere. Robotic operational autonomous vehicles, clearly very interesting. We're selling an autonomous vehicle company at the moment, and there is a feeding frenzy around it. And these are not autonomous vehicles that go on public roads. These are ones that go around airports and large military facilities. So AI is invested in these spaces. So that's often the place where you look. When I think about AI, I think about machine data analysis, natural language processing, and machine vision. And we've seen some of that. But what is clear at the moment, that it's machine data analysis that is making the running in terms of the volume and value of exits. And I would say that is essentially because it is leveraging the billions and billions and billions that have been put into AI, into IT since the end of the Second World War. Whether these are much more particular applications which sit on the end. This adds huge, huge value to everything that we're already doing. These are novel and interesting applications. So if you look at the total number of artificial intelligence M&A deals, I could make the case that that's an exponential curve at the moment. And I would expect to see that going up and up and up and up. So, we are surfing a big wave here at the moment. This is machine analysis. Just look how that has taken off in terms of the number of deals from the second half of 2015 to the first half of 2018. Multiple improvements every year, and that will keep going. I do not doubt that. Natural language processing got very excited and has now leveled off again. But you can see, these are single-digit figures as opposed to tens in the previous segment. And machine vision too is again very low. And the reality is most machine vision applications are military and defence. So who's buying who? If you try and get 6 slides down into one, this is what you get. So what is quite interesting is there's quite a high proportion of multiple applications going on, and these are the people with the huge war chests. There's a surprise. Now, if I showed you this same slide in virtually every other segment in tech M&A, you wouldn't even know the names of most of the companies. So this is highly unusual. But these are the companies that are minting money because they're B2B and B2C companies who are dominant in their environment. We're seeing that's an interesting, we think, that was one of the key transactions in the last quarter, which again is a financial sector transaction. $500 million paid for a company that does machine learning. But this is interesting, if you look at the trailing value, they've dropped down again. There's a few deals there that were very, very highly rated in terms of their multiples. But if we're looking, it's pretty much 11x, 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 11x. That should go back up again, I would say. If we're talking, say, in a year's time, and placing a binary bet, I'd say that is going to go up. It is a land grab at the moment, and the big boys are looking for the stuff that will essentially allow them to leap onto the next S-curve of growth. So saying that slowly, because I'm listening to myself say it and thinking, is that true? Yes, it absolutely is. Because the danger is they're coming to a paradigmatic end of their own history. If they don't drive into AI, they won't have a future. But it's really interesting to have a look at what they're doing. You can see this leveraging their existing businesses. Google tends to acquire companies at an earlier stage than other companies. It's much more of a casino investor. It will take a punt on most things. I think this is also very interesting, the way Microsoft has become a mobile company, where it wasn't. Not two examples. But you can imagine if you're Salesforce with your model, why you should be very interested in machine learning. So they're there. So those are just examples of what is going on. So what can you take away from this? Well, if you haven't worked it out already, it is true that tech M&A is the new R&D. So if you're following one of the major technology companies, you should also be following very closely what they're acquiring, because unless they're one of the big ones, they'll be spending more on M&A than they are on R&D. They're going to continuously have to acquire, and I think that AI feeding frenzy is going to go on for a few years yet. This is a dramatic, disruptive shift in the technological landscape. And people talk about Industry 4.0, and I'm involved in groups in the North who are trying to properly regenerate at least part of the North. But there's a long way to go, because this is hugely disruptive. There's lots of money chasing it. Both the financiers and the strategic buyers are actively competing hard. And again, I can't believe just how much money is being thrown at this autonomous vehicle company we're currently selling. It exceeded all our expectations. But generally in the marketplace, it's more deals at slightly lower valuations, because some slightly more mature companies are being bought. And they are more US-centric. You are much more likely to be bought by a West Coast outfit than if you were in a normal bit of IT. But it is hot. You're going to have to watch this sector, because it is the key to the next level of growth in the world economy. It's that important.
I'm just interested in your own personal efforts to regenerate the North.
Mm-hmm.
Are you concentrating on established centres of excellence? So, I don't know, medtech around Leeds and just leveraging off that natural strength, or materials technology at Manchester, that kind of thing. Is that the approach, or are you totally reinventing?
No. I mean, I think good forensic thoughts. As a graduate of and a former lecturer at the University of Manchester, you'd think I might be involved in there, but I'm not. It's actually in Sheffield, where we are building on that part of the country's profound expertise in materials, and working particularly around the advanced manufacturing centres, one of which is on the site of the Orgreave colliery coke works, which, if those of you who are old enough remember, was the last great battle of the 83 miners' strike. And on that site are Boeing and Rolls-Royce, obviously attracted there because they're being subsidised to be there, but also because there is a lot of expertise and material around that area. And companies like Metallicis, which was originally established in Cambridge, that make powder metals, Very, very important in 3D printing. So, if you're Rolls-Royce or Boeing, and you've got distributed fleets of engines and planes around the world, the idea of being able to locally print a spare part rather than having to identify one from a warehouse, fly it out, is incredibly attractive. So you're seeing those things come together. There is hope that there are going to be centres outside of the southeast that will become world class. But I think they're going to be small, and any idea that we can go back to the size of cities and the size of people employed in wealth creation that we had 100 years ago, just nonsense. It's just not going to happen. But we should get behind where we do have expertise and not let that die away.
Yeah, well, on that very note, how long is it since we heard the phrase Silicon Glen?
Yeah, well, Silicon Glen was entirely a creation of subsidy. That's it. It was never real. As soon as the subsidy went away, the companies pulled out. So Compaq came out of Erskine, digital equipment, had its biggest site outside of the States. As soon as the subsidies disappeared, so did digital equipment. There's been some interesting small AI companies around Edinburgh University, and we could talk for a day or two about what were the actual conditions which created Silicon Valley. And the original conditions was huge amounts of government spending into research labs and defence establishments. That's what got the whole thing going. Scotland, as in every other part of the country, has got small clusters of innovation, but they're not world class. There's one of the few world class clusters of R&D based wealth creation is actually in Cambridge. And Cambridge, of course, is now suffering because it's got overheated. They don't need another big American company moving in there trying to grab the talent. But Manchester has done a pretty good job of commercialising. It's one of the last things I did before I left the employ of the university was commercialise double-skinned composite construction, which is another classic example of a technology that had been developed entirely out of public sector subsidy, and then the subsidy disappeared, and they were wondering what the hell to do. So get the young academic to go and flog it, explain to people what they could do with it. But picking winners is a notoriously difficult thing to do. But also, we shouldn't leave communities to rot, because in America you've got Silicon Valley and you've got Detroit. But actually, they've made a decision in Detroit to reduce the size of Detroit, because Detroit is never going to be the Detroit it was. It will be a city, but it won't be the car manufacturing hub of the world anymore. And it's really interesting that Ford have got a new foundation to develop new technology, and they're moving it into the old railway terminal there, which is the best thing that's happened in Detroit for a long time.
Yeah, I saw that, yeah. Thanks.
At what stage in a company's life cycle do you try and buy it, and what do you look for in your startups?
So at what stage in the company's life cycle do you try to buy it?
Buy it or sell it?
Boy, that's the boiling the ocean question. Companies are saleable at various points during their life cycle, but they become less saleable as they get older, because essentially they become less valuable because their value is generally not based on technological innovation alone. It's based on the amount of customers they have, the grit they have over the route to market, their ability to keep generating turnover and profits. There's a particular problem in the UK. It's related to funding. You often find a lot of tech companies coming to us and going, "Yeah, we think we should sell now." And it doesn't take long to figure out the reason they want to sell is because they can't get the funding to take it to the next stage. They've had their very seed funding, early stage funding, and they've hit that massive gap which exists, which stops our companies scaling. The problem is when those companies are that small, they're just not very valuable. Nobody really wants to buy them unless they happen to have a stupendous piece of technology that completely fits into what they do. Most companies want to buy a company with a track record, with a well-established management team. They want it to be producing predictable profits, predictable turnover. They want recurring revenues. I mean, SaaS has been a godsend to M&A because that's exactly what buying companies want. I can't give you that sort of, that's the answer to your question, but basically it's relatively early. The companies that get bought, you should only ever sell your company at the top of your game. One of the great bankers always said, I got extremely rich by selling out too early. You should always sell at the top of your game. Don't sell when you're climbing up, don't sell when you're falling down, because that's self-evidently a very, very bad idea. So I'm afraid the awful truth is that the companies that exit the best are the companies that have been best funded from the early days. And of course, that's where private equity and venture capital can come in to make sure a company is funded to achieve a proper growth trajectory. A lot of companies will never sell because they're basically underfunded. Their rate of growth is too slow, and they basically get overtaken because it is a global marketplace. And if we have a major recurring theme in the British economy, was the decline of the North, it's a lack of engagement in finance, in technology, because our financial system was built to fund trade. It was not built to fund industry. And like German banks, chemical bank, manufacturers, Hanover, clues in the name. So we still have a profound funding problem in this country.
Perhaps we might leave it there then. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming, and thank you especially to my speakers. That has been a very insightful morning. Thank you very much.